welcome to another episode of Ministry Matters That Matter. We're here at the Heritage Christian Set at the Exposure Youth Camp at the Von Braun Center in Huntsville, Alabama. And I have my good friend and Heritage Christian Board member, Dale Jenkins, with me today. We've known each other for many, many years. We ran into each other in an airport back in the 90s. Was it 94?
Something like that.
Both of us doing mission work in the Ukraine. We took at least one grad course together at Freed-Hardeman when we were working on a master's together. And then we preached just down the road from each other when he was at Spring Meadows and I was at Graymere in Columbia. So he was in Spring Hill and I was in Columbia. We just interacted a lot. And then now that we work together at Heritage Christian University, my suspicion is a lot of those who join us, you know him and know Jeff and know the family. But in case you don't, I want you to know him. So today I'd like you to get to know him a little bit. I want you to see some things that he and Jeff are doing to minister to those in ministry. And I want him to be able to share some wisdom with all of us on doing ministry to God's glory. So talk to me. Tell me kind of how did you become a preacher?
Well, first of all, thank you for letting me be part of this and for the work that you do with the Heritage and with this podcast and the other people that are part of it. It means a great deal, and I try to listen every time I can. So I'll keep doing well, and thank y'all for being a part of Exposure Youth Camp. We've got a little over 3,000 people here this year, and y'all are a big part of it. So we appreciate that. So I can never remember, literally, I can never remember when I didn't want to preach. I have a book called All I Want to Do Is Preach.
It's on my shelf.
I can never remember. I do remember being in fifth grade. My teacher in the class, his last name was Smith, and I cannot remember his first name, had another guy in the class, his name was Allen. I won't tell his last name. He was a student in the class, and one day he was standing on his head in the back of the classroom while Brother Smith was trying to teach the class. And I was sitting there as a fifth grader thinking, I am wasting my life. I'm in fifth grade. I haven't preached a time yet. What am I doing? So that was a moment when I went to my dad later that week and said, Dad, I want to start talking some on Wednesday night in devotional. So all I've ever wanted to do is preach. And I've never been confident. I've never been uber, I've got it all together. I've got it all figured out. In fact, we're going to talk about some keys later, but I think one of the keys of being effective at this is never thinking that you've got it all figured out.
Right.
So yeah, that's kind of my preaching story.
Self-awareness is a big deal, right? And awareness of our weaknesses.
Yeah.
And I know your dad had a big impact on your life. Or there's some lasting things you remember him seeing or doing, or just your parents. And
so I go around and speak, and especially when I'm here in the great state, here in Alabama. Most everybody knew Dad. Dad's been gone 13 years now, but he had a powerful influence on a lot of people in this state. When I go to speak somewhere and they say, "We loved your mom," that's when things are special to me. I think everybody knew Dad, but not many people knew Mom because she was a little quieter in some ways. She wasn't in a pulpit or anything, but Mom probably had more to do with my preaching in a way than my dad did, because Dad was gone all the time. Dad would leave the house every morning. Before I woke up, he'd leave the house like at 5:30 in the morning, go jog, go to his office, shower at his office, get busy. Oftentimes, I would be in bed by the time I got back home at night. He missed ball games, he missed important events. And I don't say that with any bitterness. What I learned was Mom would always say to us, he missed a ball game. Mom would say, your dad would want to be here. He'd rather be here than anywhere else. But he's out doing the most important job in the world. He's talking to somebody about Jesus. He's teaching someone the gospel. And that made an impact. Mom could have sabotaged that by saying, well, I wish your dad was here too, how horrible it is. She never said. She just said, he's doing the greatest work in the world. And so that was ingrained upon me by watching Dad, but more by listening to my mom, who really impacted that.
Well, I think about him coming to the Graymere congregation, doing evangelism workshops. And I can remember when we were having a Q&A session, somebody said, so, what's your secret? What's your program? And he said, it's not so much a program. He said, we just talk about it all the time, and everybody expects us to do it. So he said, all our leaders are constantly talking about evangelism. And he talked about that we have a core group of people who are doing Bible studies, and everybody else is trying to get them studies. And I've just never forgotten that.
But he would say to me, you don't need 50 people doing Bible studies. You'll never get that. You'll just beat your head against the wall that way. But if you got 4 or 5 people committed to studying the gospel one-on-one with people, you'll make an impact.
Yeah. So talk about your ministry. So you preach. Tell me about I know some of those places, but tell me about your experience.
I have been blessed like a lot of guys, and I don't want to say uniquely blessed, but I've always gotten more than I gave, and I mean by that, I've always felt like the recipient of blessings rather than the giver of blessings. Every church I've been privileged to work with, they weren't privileged to have me. I was privileged to have them.
And you've worked with some great churches.
I've worked with some great churches, and I did not deserve those opportunities that were given to me. I didn't do anything. I'm not super talented. I'm not highly intelligent. I don't have a bunch of degrees. I'm nothing. I'm little to nothing. I've stumbled and bumbled and fumbled my way into some good things, and every time it happens, it's like I don't know why I get to do these things. I say that, and even saying it sounds like a humble brag, so I got to be careful that I don't do that. But I have been blessed to get to do some good things. Some of it has to be consistency, because I am consistent. I consistently try to do right, and some of it has to be hard work, because I've always tried to work hard in everything I've done. But most of it is God has been good. And so when I started preaching, when I was at Freed-Hardeman in college, I preached a little place called Kossuth Church of Christ in Kossuth, Mississippi, a little church of 20 members that was financially supported by the Foot Street Church in Corinth. And I thought, I've got the greatest job in the world. I get to preach. And we baptized 4 people the first 3 months I was there. So went from 20 to like 26. There were a couple of kids involved. So it grew by 25%. And so I was telling everybody in Alcorn County, we're the fastest growing church percentage-wise in the county. It's like, But so then from there, I was blessed to go to work with the Eva Church in Eva, Alabama. And I know Eva's hired several heritage graduates through the years, and the good people there were they took me in and loved me like I was a kid, and I was an idiot. I did stuff that I now look back, and I thought a preacher should wear a coat and tie all the time. Mm-hmm. So one year it had been snowing, and the guys had a bunch of, this is out in country Alabama, or Eva, Alabama, they had car hoods, and they were snow sledding down the hill in them. And they called me and said, "Hey, why don't you come over and join us?" So I had to put my suit and tie on.
Went over and went sledding.
It went snow sledding with a suit and tie on. I was like, oh. But I was blessed to be there. And I don't know, there are challenges in every place. And I really believe, and I hope I say this right and don't say it wrong, but that every minister has 2 lists. You got a list where all the things are horrible and awful. That church, every 6 months, they didn't have elders. They'd have a meeting. I could not be in the meeting. I had to sit in my office on the other end of the hallway. They'd have a meeting, and they would discuss. They would read a prepared statement, whoever was in charge of the meeting that month, and would say, "We're going to fire the preacher. Why should we keep him?" And they would discuss for however long it took, and then they'd come down and tell me if I had a job or not.
Wow.
I think every preacher has a list. All the reasons why I'm miserable and things are horrible and everything's bad, and then all the reasons why I'm blessed to get to do what I get to do. I get paid to stand up and talk to people about Jesus. I get paid to study the Bible. I get paid to be involved in people's most intimate moments of their life. You got those 2 lists. Yeah. And you can look at either list you want to. And I've been blessed at every place I've gone because there are 2 things. I could see the bad, but I've always thought these people have been so good to me. Moved from there to Hamilton Crossroads down in South Alabama. Mm-hmm. That was my place I went and stayed for like 9 months. And while I was there, I got a call from the Hamilton congregation to Hamilton, Alabama, to preach there, and that was
another church where we were just down the road from.
That's right. You were over Christian Chapel, and that was my dream job. And my wife's dad, who's preached at the same church now for 62 years, the same congregation.
That's amazing.
62 years. Melanie thought when we moved to Hamilton, she knew it was my dream job. She thought we'll stay here the rest of our life. Yes. She made a mistake.
God had other plans.
Yeah, so then I went to the Great Granny White Church in Nashville, Tennessee. And, arrogance is a reality for every human. It's probably more of a reality for men. It's probably more of a reality for men who preach. Because every week you preach a sermon that you put hours and hours into studying and preparing for. And when you finish, People are going to walk out and they're going to say something.
Yeah.
And if you're not careful, you can start preaching for the clicks. You can start preaching
Yeah.
for the people that say, great job.
Yeah.
We got 3,006 people here right now. I had one person tell me something that was really, really bad. And it's like, I'm miserable about it.
Yeah.
One person out of 3,006, I've been coming, hey, this is great, wonderful. And so if we're not careful, we can let that happen in our life, and we can become arrogant accidentally. We don't mean to be arrogant.
Yeah.
So when I left Granny White, that great church, what a blessing it was to be there, and moved to Spring Hill, my arrogance kicked in. And my fear was, I'm going to go down here to Spring Hill, a little church of 40 people at the time, and I'm going to slip into obscurity and never be heard from again. I'll never have the opportunity to do any good anymore, but I really wanted to do it. So arrogance was there. I admit it. I don't want to be that way, but it's like I don't want to be in obscurity. I want to impact people.
Yeah.
I want to influence people. But I go in here. But when we do what we think the Lord wants us to do, and what we evaluate everything, we weigh stuff, we decide, here's what I'm going to do, here's what I think the Lord wants to do, I believe the Lord always blesses.
Always blessed it. That's right. Well, I think about all those, as you're describing that, I think about Hamilton, great church, big church in a fairly small town.
Yeah.
Then you've got Granny White, big church right there on the campus. My senior year undergrad, I was a member there. And I just think with all that history in a big city, and now a city that's exploding there in Nashville.
Crazy.
And then basically a church plant where you're meeting in, I think, a storefront. When you start out, I can remember one time you and I were talking when we were both in the area together, and you said, I think you said you only had like one adult that was much over 40. I think you had an older couple, maybe in their 80s. Everybody else
we had 4 men in the congregation. We were 500 people. We had 4 men in the congregation at one time that were over age 60. And it comes from 500 people.
I was just flabbergasted.
It's wonderful and awful at the same time.
No, I mean, it's just a complete opposite of the experience you had at Granny White. So having to did you find some things helpful in adjusting? Because those are some very distinctly different communities and churches.
So, I didn't have a problem adjusting. I think it's a mindset.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be optimistic.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to try to see the best. That's just part of what I've tried to do. And then some of it is to keep your eye on the ball. And this is what you do. You preach.
Yeah.
You train preachers. You run a school that trains preacher. What is the ball? The ball is the Word of God and preaching the Word of God. That's my job. I'm a preacher. I MC events. I wear funny clothes. I wear weird socks. I hypnotize people. I do all these other. My job is to preach the Word of God. I can do all those other things, and they're just whatsits. They're just little tidbits that maybe get somebody to pay a little more attention. The Word of God and preaching the Word of God has got to be the focus. And so whether I was preaching, and it's still true today, I preached at a church in Pennsylvania not long ago, and there were 7 people present, 7 people. And I thought, I'm getting to preach the Word of God to 7 people today. 2 of them were not Christians. What a blessed privilege that is. And then in a couple months, I'll be at CYC. We'll have 15,000 people there. It doesn't matter which it is. As a minister, you keep your eye on the ball. Preaching the Word of God. Focus on it. And and outside of that, Sunday comes every 7 days, and you just kind of roll with those punches. Every week, there's going to be problems, there's going to be good things, there's going to be bad things, but every Sunday I'm going to stand up and I'm going to preach the Word of God before people, and I get the privilege of doing that. I don't know if that means anything or not.
Well, I think there's something powerful about having a sense of purpose. I think about Jesus. He had a clear sense of what he was here to do. And I think one of the things that has been a key means how God's used you. You love preaching. And so it doesn't matter what the environment is. And that people can sense when you actually love what you're doing and believe in what you're doing. That's powerful to people.
So, Kirk, I need to say this. Loving it doesn't mean you're good at it.
Yes.
Loving it doesn't mean I'm good at it. When you say that, and I appreciate it, and I do love to preach, but my insecurities and my lack of confidence that is a reality is there every single time I get up. Early on, I plagiarized a lot of sermons. I wasn't stealing anybody's sermon. I'd hear a guy preach, and I'd think, that's better than anything I could say on that, and I'd use his material. And I would tell people, I'm using this guy's material. Mm-hmm. I wasn't purposely plagiarizing anybody. It was a lack of confidence. I love to preach. That doesn't mean I think I'm good at it or that I'm good at it. Mm-hmm. But if you preach, you got to preach.
And you got to do your best every time.
Do your
you get
best
up
every
there.
time you get up there. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
We feel what you feel. The word has to be preached, and we've got to get people ready to do it. And I hope those of you, we tried throughout this to emphasize what you do matters. And you're going to have, as Alexander said, those terrible, no good, very bad days when you want to move to Australia. But you need to know that what you do matters, and that the gospel needs to be preached in Alabama and Australia and across the globe, that what you do is important. Don't quit. Don't give up. Keep standing in the gaps, and God will use you to save lives and to change the world. I appreciate Dale joining us today. I appreciate you joining us. And thank you for being a part of another episode of Ministry Matters That Matter.